Welcome into the Back Porch Sports Report, and today is a brand new style of episode, I guess you could say. It's called Golden Games, and this is something that we're doing. It's a look at the greatest games ever played in sports history. Each episode is going to focus on one game or series that had a big impact on how we view sports. We will look at the teams, players, and moments that make it special and memorable. Today's game is Super Bowl III. Super Bowl III was the third AFL-NFL championship game in professional American football, and it was the first to actually bear the name and the trademark Super Bowl, played on January 12, 1969, at the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. The game pitted the AFL champion New York Jets against the NFL champions, the Baltimore Colts. The game was broadcast in the United States on NBC Sports, at the time a service of NBC News, with Kurt Gowdy handling the play-by-play duties, and he was joined by color commentators. I'm going to mess these names up probably. Al DeRotas and Kyle Rote in the broadcast booth. Also helping with NBC's coverage was Jim Simpson, reporting from the sidelines, and Pat Summerall, on loan from CBS, helping conduct player interviews for the pregame show along with Rote. In an interview later done by NFL Films, Gowdy called this game the most memorable game that he had ever called due to its historical significance. While the Orange Bowl was sold out for the game, the live telecast was not shown in Miami due to both leagues' unconditional blackout rules at the time. The game is thought to be the earliest surviving Super Bowl game preserved on videotape in its entirety, save for a portion of the Colts' fourth quarter scoring drive. The original NBC broadcast was aired as part of the NFL Network's Super Bowl Classics series. 41.66 million people in the United States watched the game on television. The Baltimore Colts had won the 1958 and 1959 NFL championships under coach Weeb Ewbank. In the following years, however, the Colts failed to make the playoffs, and the Colts dismissed Ewbank after a 7-7 record in 1962. He was soon hired by New York's new AFL franchise, which had just changed its name from the Titans to the Jets. In Eubank's place, Baltimore hired an untested young head coach, Don Shula, who would go on to become one of the game's greatest coaches. The Colts did well under Shula, despite losing to the Cleveland Browns in the 1964 NFL championship game, and in 1965 losing in overtime to the Green Bay Packers in a tiebreaker game to decide the NFL Western Conference Championship. The Colts finished a distant second in the West to the Packers in 1966 and 67, with the NFL realigned into 4 divisions of 4 teams each. They went undefeated with 2 ties through their first 13 games, but lost the game and the Coastal Division Championship to the Los Angeles Rams on the final Sunday of the season. Under newly instituted tiebreaker procedures, LA won the division championship and had its best net points in 2 games the teams played. So the Rams win and an earlier tie. The Colts finished with a record of 11-1-2, tied for the best record in the league, but were excluded from the playoffs. In 1968, Shula and the Colts were considered a favorite to win the NFL championship again, which carried with it the automatic berth, what was now becoming popularly known as the Super Bowl, as we mentioned earlier, against the champion of the younger AFL. The NFL champion in both cases, the Green Bay Packers, had easily won the first 2 Super Bowls in 1967 and 68 over the AFL winner. establishing for a while that the superiority was with the older NFL circuit. Now, Baltimore's quest for a championship seemed doomed from the start when longtime starting quarterback Johnny Unitas suffered a preseason injury to his throwing arm and was replaced by Earl Morrall, a veteran who had started inconsistently over the course of his 12 seasons with 4 teams. But Morrall would go on to have the best year of his career, leading the league in passer rating at 93.2 during the regular season. His performance was so impressive that Colts coach Don Shula decided to keep Morrall in the starting lineup after Unitas was healthy enough to play. The Colts had won 10 games in a row, including 4 shutouts, and finished the season with an NFL best 13-1 record. In those 10 games, they had allowed only 7 touchdowns. Then the Colts avenged their sole regular season loss against the Cleveland Browns by crushing them 34-0 in the NFL championship game. The Colts offense ranked second in the NFL in points scored with 402. Wide receivers Jimmy Orr, 29 receptions, 743 yards and 6 touchdowns, and Willie Richardson, 37 receptions, 698 yards and 8 touchdowns, provided Baltimore with 2 deep threats, with Orr averaging 25.6 yards per catch and Richardson averaging 18.9. Tight end John Mackey also recorded 45 receptions for 644 yards and 5 touchdowns. Pro Bowl running back Tom Matt was the team's top rusher with 662 yards and 9 touchdowns. He also caught 25 passes for 275 and another touchdown. Running backs Terry Cole and Jerry Hill combined for 778 rushing yards and 236 receiving yards. The Colts' defense led the NFL in fewest points allowed, 144, tying the all-time league record, and ranked third in total rushing yards, allowing 1,339, while also recording 29 interceptions and holding their opponents to an NFL low 9 touchdown passes. Bubba Smith, a 6'7", 295 defensive end, considered the NFL's best pass rusher, anchored the line. Linebacker Mike Curtis, who intercepted 2 passes and recovered 3 fumbles, was considered one of the top linebackers in the NFL. Baltimore's secondary consisted of defensive backs Buddy Boyd, 8 interceptions, Rick Volk, 6 interceptions, and Lenny Lyles, 5 interceptions, and also Jerry Logan, 3 interceptions. The Colts were the only NFL team to routinely play a zone defense. That gave them a great advantage in the NFL because other teams were inexperienced against playing a zone. This would not, however, give them advantage over the upstart New York Jets because zone defenses were used in the AFL. The New York Jets, led by Coach Weeb Eubank, the coach of the Colts, when they won the famous 1958 NFL game and later the 59 title, also finished the season 11-3 in the regular season, with one loss was to the Oakland Raiders in the infamous Heidi game, and had to rally to defeat those same Raiders 27-23 in the thrilling AFL championship game. Jets quarterback Joe Namath threw for 3,147 yards during the regular season and completed 49.2% of his passes, but threw more interceptions, 17, than touchdowns, 15. Still, he led the offense effectively enough for them to finish the regular season with more total points scored, that's 419, than Baltimore, and finished 4th in completion percentage, 5th in touchdown passes, and 3rd in passing yards as one of only 3 quarterbacks to pass for over 3,000 yards in the AFL season. More importantly, Namath also found ways to win. For example, late in the 4th quarter of the AFL championship game, Namath threw an interception that allowed the Raiders to take the lead, but he then made up for his mistake by completing 3 consecutive passes on the ensuing drive, advancing the ball 68 yards in just 55 seconds to score a touchdown to regain the lead for New York. Future Hall of Famer wide receiver Don Maynard caught the game-winning pass in the end zone but strained his hamstring on the play. The Jets had a number of offensive weapons that Namath used. Maynard had the best season of his career, catching 57 passes for 1,297 yards. That's an average of 22.8 yards per catch and 10 touchdowns. Wide receiver George Sawyer Jr. recorded 66 receptions for 1,100 yards and 3 touchdowns. Tight end Pete Lamons had 32 receptions for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. The rushing attack was also effective. Fullback Matt Snell, a powerful runner, was the top rusher on the team with 747 yards, 6 touchdowns, while elusive halfback Emerson Boozer contributed 441 yards and 5 touchdowns. Meanwhile, kicker Jim Turner made 34 field goals and 43 extra points for a combined total of 145 points. The Jets' defense led the AFL in total rushing yards, allowing only 1,195. Jerry Philbin, Paul Rochester, and John Elliott with Verlon Biggs anchored the defensive line. The Jets' linebacker corps was led by middle linebacker Al Atkinson. The secondary was led by defensive backs Johnny Sample, a former Colt who played on their 1958 championship team, who had recorded 7 interceptions, and Jim Hudson, who recorded 5. Despite the Jets' accomplishments, AFL teams were generally not regarded as having the same caliber of talent as NFL teams. However, 3 days before the game, an intoxicated Joe Namath appeared at the Miami Touchdown Club and boldly predicted to the audience, "We're going to win the game, I guarantee it." Coach Eubank later joked that he could have shot Namath for the statement. Namath made his famous guarantee in response to a rowdy Colts supporter at the club who boasted the Colts would easily defeat the Jets. Namath said that he never intended to make such a public prediction and would not have done so if he were not confronted by the fan. Sports writer Dave Anderson didn't think that the remark was notable because he recalled Namath had said similar things during the week. But an article by Luther Evans of the Miami Herald made this statement famous. Namath's comments and subsequent performance in the game itself are one of the most famous instances in NFL lore. The Colts linebacker Curtis recalled that he sort of laughed at Namath's guarantee. The team did not adjust the defense that it had been using during the season against the Jets because it should have been good enough, Curtis said. The AFL champions shared the confident feelings of their quarterback, though. According to Matt Snell, all of the Jets, not just Namath, were insulted and angry that they were 19.5-point underdogs. Most of the Jets considered the Raiders, whom they barely beat 27-23 in the AFL title game, better than the Colts. Indeed, watching film of the Colts and in preparation of the game, Jets coaching staff and offensive players noted that their offense was particularly suited against the Colts defense. The Colts defensive schemes, relied on frequently blitzing, which covered up weak points in pass coverage. The Jets had an automatic contingency for such blitzes by short passes to uncovered tight ends and running backs. After a film session on the Wednesday prior to the game, Jets tight end Pete Lamons, a Texas native, was heard with a drawl, said, "Y'all, we got to stop watching these films. We're going to get overconfident." New York entered the game with their primary deep threat, wide receiver Don Maynard, playing with a pulled hamstring, but his 112-yard, 2-touchdown performance against the Oakland Raiders in the AFL championship game made the Colts defense pay special attention to him, not realizing that he was injured. See, this was before injuries had to be reported. Using Maynard as a decoy, he had no receptions in the game, actually. Joe Namath was able to take advantage of